You just give me a, okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good evening, based on which part of the globe you're joining us from. I'm Avijit Datta, and I'm very excited to welcome you all today in the inaugural edition of the Tech Debate by Globant, an exclusive platform where the game changers in the newest technology world debate from different points of view about the next issues regarding technology, society, and culture. Globant, for those who don't know, is a leader in digital transformation. So what does that mean? Simply put, we empower organizations in a digital and cognitive revolution. Globant is a digitally native company where innovation, design, and engineering meet scale. We leverage the latest technologies and methodologies in the digital and cognitive space to help organizations to transform in every aspect. Let's have a look at a short video.
Across the world, companies have been challenged to remain in constant evolution, transform their culture and business models, rethink their customer experiences, and take advantage of new technologies such as artificial intelligence. Companies face the challenge to become augmented organizations. At Globant, we help pave the way towards this future. We work together with businesses around the world to define their way ahead and augment their capabilities to create new approaches for processes, products, and strategies. We create agile and resistant cultures where teams not only create change, but also adapt rapidly, creating exceptional experiences for millions of people. We walk along this road relying on our set of disruptors and accelerators, driven by artificial intelligence. All of this boosted by our system of studios and agile pods, operating units that foster creativity and innovation. We are a native digital company focused on helping organizations rethink themselves and find their way forward through digital and cognitive transformation. The future is now, and it belongs to augmented organizations. Across the world, companies have been challenged to remain in constant evolution.
Today, we are going to talk about the genesis and the future of augmenting immortal identities. And to discuss this amazing topic, it is my honor and privilege to welcome two of the most prominent personalities in the tech industry and very good friends of mine, Sridhar Sheshadri and Dev Rakesh. Sridhar is the co-founder and CEO of Spotblock, an AI product company located out of India and the US. He is a UT Austin and BITS Pilani alumnus. He was the founding team member of Facebook India. He has built and led the product insights, advanced analytics, and AI global teams at EA Sports from the ground up. He has also received the CEO's EA Spotlight Award for driving innovation. His experience covers developing technology, management, and product development, leveraging machine learning, NLP, social, mobile, and cloud. Welcome, Sridhar, to this tech debate. We also have Dev Rakesh, who's a VP at Fractal for Streamflux, a low-code, no-code platform for citizen data scientists. He has experience in building companies in the big data and machine learning space. The latest one got acquired by Fractal. Dev has experience in leading and growing all sectors of businesses to make it a dynamic and progressive organization. He's a firm believer in humanity and nature. When he's not busy doing something at work, he can be found traveling and meeting awesome people across the globe. I welcome you, Dev, once again to this tech debate. As humanity is embarking towards digital supremacy, it is inevitable to strengthen and augment our capabilities beyond just our biological being. Today, we are at that stage of data maturity where our digital replica of our biological being can be created using artificial intelligence. But can this digital replica of ours exist even long after we are gone to truly imitate the existence forever? According to Ray Kurzweil, the father of the singularity concept, man and machine will eventually merge. He predicted that we would be able to upload our minds to a computer by 2045, but he has not provided a blueprint for how to do it. Technology is the easy part, he says, but achieving digital immortality will require overcoming some of the rather daunting challenges around data privacy, as well as a healthy amount of skepticism associated with it. Before we start this debate, I would request all of you to put your questions on YouTube Live. We'll be taking it post this session. So let's begin this debate I would like to quickly start with the famous golden circle by Simon Sinek to ask with the why. So why does digital immortality, a new form of intergenerational collective intelligence as a concept, even exist? What are its benefits? Sridhar, what is your take on that?
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Avi, for the introduction, like having me here. So I feel if we practically think about it, there's a lot of knowledge and there's a lot of information that we as an individual really would have part of the vertical domain or wherever like we are actually active. So you can imagine a lawyer like working in a law firm, practicing it for like 20 years, would be having like a lot of industry knowledge. And imagine like one fine day this particular person is gone. And like the way you would trust his wisdom to tackle your corporate cases. I mean, imagine the scenario where you'll just feel like there's a vacuum of the knowledge and things that you would want to be resolved now. Similarly, you can think of a doctor, like who you relied full of your life to get you to a very good, healthy state. And now when you are in a deep trouble, you see that he's gone. I mean, if we have a concept like digital immortality, and we have a complete knowledge base of these kind of people put into a way where the augmented intelligence or artificial intelligence can come together and give you exactly answers of how they would have tackled that situation, the kind of problems that you are seeing, how would they really resolve for it. I guess that's the bit. I mean, like you definitely need something like that where if people can actually become digitally immortal, I mean, that's the bit where the knowledge really stays forever and it can really solve a lot of things for us.
Thanks, Sridhar. That was a great insight. And it is also being said that the digital identity can be borrowed at 1/10 of the real human cost. I mean, you took some examples about doctor and a lawyer. So, Dev, what is your take on that? How do you think digital immortality as a concept would exist?
So I kind of agree to what Sridhar said, but I think the time frame that's mentioned, 2045, is, I believe, too soon for that to happen in the real sense. For me, I think that the whole definition of digital immortality will evolve over a period of time. So right now, the examples that Sridhar mentioned, I think I agree to that, and it's possible maybe in next 20, 30, 40, 50 years also. But in truest sense, for example, the lawyer case, right? I mean, if a lawyer is consulting and is giving advice to somebody, there are a lot of interpretations of the cases in the court and how the judges have interpreted that. Now, if the lawyer is gone and if that data is not fed into, because even the court judgment is based on the interpretation of the lawyer, right? People can interpret the same judgment in different ways. Now, if that is not done right, or if the system is not mature enough to handle all those aspects correctly, he might be giving wrong advices to his clients as a digital replica. God forbid if that client is a judge himself, then it'll go for a toss, right? So I'm assuming this is on the track to be there, but the timeline we're talking is too soon. And we need to keep evolving the definition of digital immortality. It will start from, say, digital twin, then reasonable immortality, and then complete immortality towards singularity, maybe in few centuries from now. But it will happen that way. I mean, I can see that it's going that route.
Excellent, Dev. Now, moving on, there is a famous Mexican researcher by the name Joshua Hurtado, who's presented a 4-step process in the entire digital immortality life cycle for people, right? Just to connect that bond between the social bond between the living and the dead. Now, these 4 steps that he has defined is mainly in terms of data gathering, data codification, data activation, as well as data embodiment. Now, if we talk about the core process of realizing a true immortal digital being, what that process would be according to you, Dev?
So I think it's going to be similar what he has mentioned, right? I mean, we need to capture as much as information as possible, and we're talking about digital immortality, but that is only for the digital footprint. There will be many other aspects that we need to capture, for example, physiological, emotional, contextual, and it has to be a very comprehensive data gathering process, beyond which it will become the process of computation, which I think is going very fast, because with quantum computation, all those things are possible. However, the challenge would be in the long run how do I get the right information, not just what is present digitally or verbally or visually, but also contextually, hormonal, physiological, and all that aspects to be captured well enough so that my models can actually compute and infer information from whatever is happening. So that's where I say the time frame is quite long. It's not going to happen soon, but that would be the process. I mean, right now, I think the biggest challenge would be to capture all the non-digital information that is possible. And we need to have volunteers for that. So, for example, if you ask anybody to put a chip inside him so that he can be monitored for day in, day out, not a lot of people will agree for that. And therefore, I think that process still remains the same, what you mentioned, but it has to, again, data capturing is going to be the crux of everything.
Based on where we are standing today, what are the key challenges that you feel that we have as far as data capture is concerned?
So it'll evolve. That's what I'm saying, that it'll evolve. Right now, see, for humans, the entire information is available in DNA, right? And that's humongous amount of information. Now, how can we capture that kind of information in a technically capable tool is going to be the challenge, right? Yes, some of the researchers mentioned that the entire digital footprint can be measured or captured within 1 terabyte or 1 petabyte of data for an individual. But I'm still assuming that the DNA has a lot more information than that, and that it is that when we will reach the mortality. So that still has to evolve, and not just storage. How would you process that information? How would you transfer that information? So if you don't do that, what you mentioned, the examples of lawyer and doctors could still be good in, I would call it batch situation, where you have a time lag possible. Somebody might take few seconds to respond. But in real world situation, you are driving a car, right? And you have to respond to a correct situation. How would you do that? That's a fraction of second response time. And to be able to process the entire data and then respond is going to be difficult in near future. That's what I'm saying. And eventually it will happen, but that's where it's going to be difficult. And the most challenging part of capturing and processing that, or rather responding to those situations.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Sridhar, I would like to take a stab on the process in addition to whatever they've just mentioned.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I have a different opinion on how much of data can we actually bring into the system. So definitely there is a disparity. I cannot say all of this is going to happen right away, but there are these research organizations and institutes which are working on using GPUs and TPUs kind of setup where a lot of information can be processed much faster. And on the other side, there are these IoT devices which can actually even capture your alpha waves coming from your mind. And there's a lot of research happening on these kind of initiatives. So if we practically think about it, there are multiple sources and ways of now figuring out exactly what people are thinking, how they sense, how they behave, how do they process information. Now, as they've already mentioned, we definitely need a lot of volunteers. If that's happening, a lot of things would really change. But again, if we talk about preparedness, if all of this comes together through these institutes and these research centers, I personally believe there will be repositories and open source projects like how we see for chatbots, there are these GPT 2, 3, those kind of options have evolved with time. So probably masses might take advantage of some of those kind of researches and open source initiatives maybe another 5 years or 10 years. We don't have to really even worry about whether that's too far off. But as part of process, definitely there is a requirement where larger organizations need to come forward. Institutes and research centers need to come forward. A lot of countries need to really look at the advantage of having something like this. I mean, if they practically think about the leadership decision being made by the leaders of the country, if there is a digital Immortal they can create for that person, probably there's a lot of value in it. So practically, if these initiatives are backed by larger organization, I think it will all start there. And then rest all of it is technology and operational stuff. But I think there is enough of preparedness otherwise from technology side to get started on these initiatives right now.
Thank you, Sridhar. We'll definitely touch upon the technology aspect in a while, but yeah, thanks for narrating that entire thought process about our preparedness in terms of creating a digital immortal being. So moving on, Dr. Hussain Rahnama, who's a visiting scholar at the Media Lab and Research, and he's also an innovation editor at the Raison's Digital Media Zone. He's known for coining the word augmented eternity, which is basically an extension of digital immortality. He says that 50 or 60 years from now, millennials will have reached an age where they would have collected zettabytes of data, right, individually. Now, one of the augmented eternity's key hurdles is in terms of is in terms of privacy. So, how to maintain an individual's privacy while allowing students to pick up their digital brain is still being questioned. Interrogating and augmenting eternity persona about intimate aspects of the former humanity, right? Their feeling for the loved ones, or let's say the most embarrassing secrets, for instance, right, would be not only inappropriate, but it would be morally transgressive. This will be, of course, overcome by the implementation of controlled subject-specific chat sessions that restrict access to different memory recalls. But then, what, according to you, are the potential hazards for creating an augmented immortal being? Sridhar.
So, Avi, I think there are two aspects that you are talking about right now. One is the privacy aspect of it, and then the consequences if like all of that is not taken care of. I mean, things can go wrong because if you haven't taken care of some of these things. I believe my big bet is on the decentralized systems. I mean, like it could be like blockchain kind of technology, maybe it could be as simple as hash graph kind of technologies which are coming up right now, where we don't keep all the data on like centralized servers and no single organization really needs to have control of it. Even if organizations or communities who are trying to keep control on something like that, I believe the best thing would be like it is driven by communities and it's kind of a DAO kind of organization setup. That will actually resolve a lot of stuff. But now coming to the data privacy part of it, the moment things have their own trail on blockchain kind of technology, a lot of encrypted data can be put onto these blockchain, and any point of time, agencies or individuals can pay and get their audit, personal level of audit of how the information has been like stored on these kind of infrastructure. Now, coming to the hazard part, if we don't do this, we are already seeing like how common the breach situation is in like a lot of developing countries, I mean, even developed countries too, where the data breach really has caused a lot of issues with people's personal situation. There were these dating websites like which had a lot of personal information. If I talk about those scenarios, which has caused like major chaos in people's personal life, left a lot of people with trauma. There have been like situations where there are financial organizations where the data has been breached and a lot of personal information has been actually accessed by a lot of entities. So I personally feel if this is not taken care of, this is like a bigger problem than identity theft, because technically I'm allowing some technology to create a replica of me. And when I'm gone, and if this is not like leveraged correctly, this is going to be like very dangerous for the society. It can go either ways. So definitely there's like a lot of work to be done on one, making all of this decentralized, auditable, and two, like ensuring there's security to all of it.
Excellent. So you talked about blockchain as one of the technology which can be utilized to, creating those digital identities. But then, what do you think that is going to be orthogonal in terms of, the differentiation between privacy of the data as well as decentralization of the information which is being spread across communities or let's say continents for that matter, just for the virtue of keeping it secure and safe?
So I believe there are a lot of companies right now which are already working on like bringing cybersecurity, data privacy, and blockchain together. And I feel like if we follow some of those frameworks and blueprints that have been set up in communities which are like doing this in open source, I think that's a very good starting point for doing something like this. Because ultimately there are multiple encryption techniques that people would use to like encrypt the data and then they'll keep it safely. One, two, because this is a peer-to-peer transaction between like information. When I've created my identity and I've put my data on a kind of decentralized server and there is a peer that is seeking this information from another peer, the beauty would be you would know where the transaction has happened between like two nodes. So technically you would know what information was sought by whom, where, and this trail is also maintained somewhere on blockchain. So you would know if something went wrong, how to like go back and at least zero down and figure out like where what went wrong. So I feel like having those kind of systems and then there is auditability mechanisms would make it make all of this process simpler. And definitely there's whole cybersecurity layer to all of this. When we talk about like putting data, definitely there's encryption when you put that data onto these decentralized servers. So I hope like I answered your question. Like, okay, if there's anything more, like please let me know if I can help you.
No, totally. I think it did. So moving to Div, would you like to extend the thought, or do you have any different opinion in terms of the potential hazards?
So obviously, data storage and data privacy is probably going to be the biggest risk and hazard that we need to guard against. But not only that, I mean, my concern is that if you make it available for common people and research projects, my concern is not just the data privacy. Probably we can take care of that, as Shraddha mentioned, and it will evolve, I'm sure, with time. What if we start inducing errors in the system, in that data, right? And that is where I think my concern comes into picture, that how much trust will I have in that digital replica of a person, for example, lawyer, doctor, friend, family, whatever, if I'm not sure that somebody has, because I'm a user, right? I'm not going to do the audit for everything that I'm going to ask, but the trust is going to be the important factor. That how am I going to be sure that this information that was probably downloaded from somebody's brain is not tampered with, or maybe another version of that has not been created? How much can I trust? So that trust would be one of the important factors. And if that trust factor is not there, then that would be the biggest hazard or threat to this entire concept. Because if somebody can just creep into the system, having some community driven, yes, you can obviously track the trail and then find it out. But when you're talking about a larger number, 1, 2, 10, 15, 100 may be possible. But when you're talking about millions of people, it's going to be it's like the course in India, right? The cases keeps running for years. It might become difficult to do that in those situations. And therefore, that would be one hazard that we need to guard against for sure.
Totally. Thanks, Dev. And I think somehow these two things will be interdependent, and maybe can be used. In complement with each other. When we talk about data storage, the corpus data can be cryptographically stored into a storage medium where any kind of alteration would change the entire format of the data, right? And something similar to what Sridhar mentioned about using blockchain to ensure that there is a distributed ledger which is cryptographically secured. Could come to the rescue, right? So, Dev, coming back to the digital twin aspect, you did mention about digital twin when we started. So, how do you think digital immortality is different from digital twin? And do you really think the latter is just a predecessor of the former in the true sense?
I think so, because right now digital twin is being implemented at many places, especially financial and other similar areas. But that's the start. I think that's the stepping stone towards digital immortality. It will eventually go from being digital twin to being a more personalized replica for each individuals. And that's already happening, I'm sure. And then after that, the concept of immortality would come, which again, I feel is not going to be a one-step thing. It will be a series of things that will happen, which will eventually lead into singularity. And as we say this, I mean, we're talking about digital immortality, right? There is also a group that is working on your biological immortality. And I believe that the two paths will converge together in years to come, where your digital and biological immortality will come together, and that will be when we are talking about true singularity. And yeah, I mean, that's how it will happen. So I think digital twin is the first part towards digital immortality, but that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, I think that's pretty nicely put. And I think you mentioned about biological immortality also. So if you see with technologies like cryonics, which is basically preserving your head, which has the brain. I mean, there are some hypotheses which is currently being debated across the medical industry as well as the technology industry, that you can really recreate human being once again, as long as the memory is stored in the brain.
Right.
So, talking about the differentiation between the digital immortality and digital twin, Sridhar, would you like to take a stab on that?
Yeah, I mean, like in theory, there was already mentioned what it is. I think this whole space has to evolve a lot because there is this whole level of consciousness that is not yet tapped in. While we talk about like data, putting data together, there's a decision making. Definitely, like a lot of highly evolved AI-based systems have actually come into play. And then the next thing is like quantum computing coming in that will make like some of these complicated calculations really coming out like much faster. But I think human beings are beyond just calculations also. I mean, like when we take decisions, I mean, the moral dilemma kind of situations where you would be in. I mean, that's the real fix where can we really have a perfect digital immortal who would think like me, where a lot of people would perceive me as a very calculative person. But like there is a subconscious level element that can just change my decision at the moment where I have to just finally take a call. And I think that's the most critical and beautiful piece when it comes to digital immortality. But I'm not getting into the theory part of like digital twin and digital immortality right now. But as they've already mentioned, a lot of work is already happening in space of digital twin. But with digital immortality, I believe like where we are right now, it's just the starting point. I mean, if you imagine like 2 decades before now, when we used to talk about like the whole like e-vehicle industry and all of that, how that has evolved now, that has become a reality. My trust is definitely like once human really go after these kind of problem statements, I mean, like we'll start seeing something really turning out to be very meaningful and useful. So, I mean, that's my stance on it.
Perfect. Sure. So thanks, Sridhar. So just extending your thought, and now that we have understood understood the entire concept of why digital immortality as a concept exists, what is the process of creating one? Now talking on the moral obligation side, Sridhar, what according to you are the cultural and ethical implications of creating a truly digital immortal being?
So this is like one of the favorite subtopics of all of this, because I mean, culturally, this goes both the ways. So we were discussing this like as one of the things like internally, and I got like a lot of flashback from people when it was about these mobile apps which are letting you create AI avatars, and you can bring like some emotions and animations for people who have departed. So there is this aspect which is very spiritual and religious for one sect and one cult which would not like it. And then there are these millennials who really appreciated that things that they haven't seen in their life before, or people they haven't seen before actually. They've just recreated all of their emotions and they are able to at least imagine and visualize that. This is going to be like very tricky where culturally we are going to be in a fix where a lot of cultures might appreciate it, a lot of cultures might not appreciate it. So for sure, this is more of an ethical problem to tackle. So ethical framework would be definitely required to tackle all of this bit, apart from the governance piece. So I feel we are going to run into like a lot of issues. It's like how you can imagine like 1800s when there was the first vehicle that would have actually hit somebody on the road, and there were no laws to like manage it. We're pretty much on similar path when this goes live, and people start seeing like issues with that part of it, and they feel like, oh, like example, like somebody never used swear words in their life, and their digital twin starts doing it. Maybe like their digital immortal persona starts doing it. I mean, like there's going to be a lot of issues like those that people will have to tackle. And then there is metaverse kind of scenarios which are coming where the whole ecosystem would give you possibilities to go into virtual world, talk to your digital avatars, or maybe like people who are no more there, but again, like still they're giving you all the wisdom and knowledge. And if we run into one of those issues, we are definitely going to run into a lot of issues related to ethics, culture-related issues, and governance. So I clearly see a big problem coming along with that. But again, I personally believe there are IEEE kind of organizations. They really do a lot of due diligence where global forums, they come together and then they solve for it. So it should start happening soon as well.
Thanks, Sridhar. I think it's an interesting perspective. And I believe when we talk about ethics, the attempts in terms of ethical AI, explainable AI, open AI would answer some of these hidden questions. I mean, as far as digital immortality is concerned. So coming to you, Dev, what is your take on the cultural, moral, ethical obligations for digital immortality?
So I think I agree with what Sridhar mentioned. So I think we will be seeing a lot of cultural issues once it comes into the real life at a scale and at a maturity that we're talking about right now. In fact, I believe there will be cultures developed based on the belief in this into the system, like we have religions now. And it might not happen soon again, but I believe that this people will have their own opinion about the digital immortality thing, and they will start perceiving it in the way they want to. And then they will have their followers, and likewise things will evolve that way. That's how I see. I might, again, it's something in future I can't predict that's definitely going to happen, but I see that cultures will evolve around digital immortality, and there will be people who will always object, people who will always support. So it's going to happen that way. Again, what Sridhar mentioned, ethics is going to be the key. How ethically are we going to use this information and absorb this information both, not just preparing that information. So this is going to be really critical, because if it goes into a wrong hand, even for a smaller amount of time, this could create a lot of chaos. So I think it will be more about ethics and governance around that. Cultures, I'm sure, for anything that is transformational, you will have followers, you will have people who will object, and people will evolve around that.
And that is indeed true for the real human beings as well, let alone the digital beings. Thank you, Devan Sridhar. Now, moving on, one of the great researchers in this area, by the name Richard Grandmorian, he has beautifully, summarized the entire equation of digital immortality as a semantic analysis applied over the social internet use. Now that social internet has been in works for the past decade or two, and applied artificial intelligence on top of it. He just says that, okay, if you just add all of these things together, you create a digital immortal being. So how do you think society and business would go about adopting a digital format of the deceased? And what impact would that truly have on society and business in the long term? Maybe we'll start with Dev.
So I think it'll start with the commercial and the corporate starting to use this concept first. Just imagine Steve Jobs giving his advice and sharing his thought process even 100 years after he has gone, right? I'm sure that will be a huge impact, because people 100 years down the line or 50 years down the line wouldn't have worked with Steve Jobs before, right? So they don't really understand the way why Apple is what it is right now. So I think the corporates would start adopting it sooner. As I said, for the common man, first, it's going to be really expensive to start with, unless it's commoditized. And second, there will be cultural issues. So it'll take a longer time for people to adjust and accept that. But I think for corporate reasons, it'll happen sooner.
Great. Sridhar, what is your take on that?
So I have a little different opinion. I earlier used to believe the corporates would be the first one to go and do that. But if you actually look at these B2C applications, which are put like that expensive AI in like normal person's hand, and they're like giving it like for a very cheap subscription model, where I can implement filters and a picture can smile, it can blink, it can move around. I look at like all these big companies, big corporations like Snapchat, kind of category ones, where they are like thinking of next level of integrations of AR, VR, metaverse kind of thing into the system. And they have got like enough of backing as well, like from both research as well as funding. I won't be surprised this time, like unlike usually how B2B businesses or maybe corporates would pick it up first. But I believe like how the current trend is, it would be these B2C applications that would bring this kind of technology in people's hands first. Maybe in your Oculus headset, you're going to like see some of those happening already. And then big corporates and consulting companies might struggle to think of like more innovative ways to take it to a lot of clients, because a lot of clients need to learn and have to be educated on the value of it, and then like really think about it. So some use cases, like as I mentioned at the beginning, might be very easy to think of and sell. But again, as you know, as AI really got into the market, it became a commodity. Everybody started to learn and sell it fast. Similarly, I believe this technology, if it comes through the open source channel or maybe by community development route, it will go to like masses very fast. So I believe like definitely my 2 cents would be on a commercialized thing, which people can actually quickly buy, and it's actually put onto like these devices, new devices like handheld devices or maybe headsets or smart glasses. It's for sure coming very fast.
Excellent. Thanks, Sridhar. There is a parallel school of thought as far as digital immortality is concerned, right? We have talked about some of the famous names in the form of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, maybe Elon Musk for that matter. But then as the human race is evolving, right, there is another, critics which do criticize this concept altogether by saying that, hey, after 100 years from now, we would have been a better version of ourselves. I mean, if you look at our kids or the next generation is coming up, they are definitely much more smarter than we were when we were at their age. Now the question comes in. I mean, is it something that we should really invest in, or it is just for the matter of educating ourselves to better prepare for the future? Maybe we'll start with Sridhar.
I mean, this is really very interesting question, and I really, though I'm a commercial person, I'll think and I'll justify, oh, there is every possible use case we can take this and sell this for. But to be very honest, if I'm thinking about my kids, my next generation, really what doesn't bother is the typical education where these kids would go to the school and learn about science or technology, because that information is coming very fast. They're becoming very smart to absorb it. The real challenge that we're seeing with the coming generations and like current millennials is about the stress, the kind of lifestyle they are living. I mean, the kind of situations where the moral and morality itself is a big thing for us. So if we think about like all of these aspects, even today, the 100-year-old wisdom, Zen wisdom, or Buddha's wisdom, you pick anything which is about morality, which is about positivity, which is about leadership. I mean, these are fundamentals and these are never going to change like even in another 200 years from now. So I personally feel like if there is a use case which is really more powerful, is actually about the will, it's about the leadership, it's all about the knowledge of this sort, because this is the primary battery or the power bank to drive everything around like in terms of innovation. So if somebody have their core right, and if there are digital twins of like Sun Tzu, for example, even today, and I take those principles and management after like hundreds of years, I think that's like the big thing for me. If I can imagine and ask a question to him today about like how would he tackle this kind of situation, and there is a permutation and it just tells me like two of his quotes where I can draw a conclusion out of those two quotes, I think that's really very powerful practically to think about it. So I still see there's a lot of value in all of this, and there will always be business value. If not like 100 years old information, if the 50-year-old information is being looked upon, I mean, like how Google has changed like searching information, it will become a way of like at least identifying the right piece of information to go after, if not like the exact accurate piece that we're looking for. And when it is about hundreds of years of old bit of it, definitely there's what makes us human. I mean, that aspect will definitely come from these digital immortals. I mean, that's how I look at it.
Thank you, Sridhar. Dev, would like to take a stab in that as well?
I think I agree totally with Sridhar on this, because things which are fundamentally correct will always be correct. And I also have the opinion that these digital immortal replicas would be actually learning when we are using them, right? So it will evolve also. So 100 years from now, we will be different. Definitely, this will be different as well. So that evolution will happen for the digital replica as well. But the fundamentals which have been in place for long, tried and tested, it is what that person was, right? And as Sridhar mentioned, morals, ethics, probably that's a challenge that I can see again, few years from now, maybe 2 generations from now. It will be really difficult for people to differentiate what's ethically right, because that would have modeled up so much that it's difficult to say, okay, this has been done by us and the society for last 10 years. Is it right? But quite possible it is not. And that is going to be coming out from things which have been there for before. Right? So I think it will evolve as per knowledge, but the base of what we are now or what we were around 100 years ago is going to be very critical and important in the future.
Excellent. Fair enough. Thanks, Dev. So I believe the conclusion of this is the fundamental wisdom still has to be incorporated into the digital being, because only the algorithms will not be sufficient to take those decisions by itself. Fair enough. So moving on, talking about governance and regulation for the digital being. How do you think, I mean, the privacy policies or laws for that matter needs to be calibrated, fine-tuned to make it happen? Dev?
Yeah, so I think we kind of touched on this before. Sridhar mentioned about technology and the upgrades that's happening in that space for securing it. And I also believe, obviously, that's correct. But I believe, as I said, it's a multi-step process. So the regulations and the governance model will evolve as the technology evolves, as the usage evolves, as the interpretation evolves. So I'm sure these rules will keep changing for a longer time frame. till they become so robust that the leaks and the biases and the fakes can be avoided in a way uh, which is not going to disrupt anything. Obviously, there still be, I mean, even for humans, right? People make mistakes. Errors are going to happen anyways, and even then it will happen. But the chances of that happening would be 1 in a million, and I think that's acceptable. So it will evolve. The rules and regulations and the governance and everything would evolve along with technology usage and understanding of the system. I think we're right now at step 1, maybe point 1 for that. So it's too early to say how governance and regulations should be at step 100. So I think we're too early in that stage.
Thank you, Dev. Sridhar, what is your take on that?
So I believe the current generation and the millennials, I mean, like how they are looking at a lot of stuff. Everything is going to be community driven. I think a lot of my big bet is always on decentralized way of like looking at things, because you imagine like how communities used to have a moderator to manage everything, and then they will say, oh, somebody is not doing it right, so they're just going to kick the person out of the community. So that thing is going to change. There's going to be more consensus mechanism. There's going to be more information where a lot of people will arrive onto way of defining these rules dynamically. So as Dev said, I'm 100% like on the same page where he said, we're in step 1, there's step 100 to go, and then we should talk about some of those. But definitely there is a big bunch of groups which is coming together, trying to define the whole ethics framework. As you already know, there is something already for AI and basically IA kind of like intelligent automation systems as well. So for sure, there is more that will come. So there's going to be a basic blueprint of AI's ethics and governance, because Bill Gates did mention that AI will be taxed by human if it goes wrong. So governments will have to think and build something around it that case. So similarly, this will get extended to like this whole digital immortality concept as well, like I feel. So yeah, definitely it's too early to talk about it, but again, like communities would definitely drive it is my take on it, rather than like certain individuals or governments, and things will change in coming times.
Thank you, Sridhar. So as far as human beings are concerned, majority of the corrections for that matter is being done by the community or society for that matter, right? Or let's say some people have some certain religion, beliefs and whatnot, right? And that if you see at a very, very, grand level, puts us into some buckets, right? In terms of how we behave, how we act, or how we are supposed to act for that matter, right? Now, since we have talked about governance and regulation, right? There are some external factors which would definitely induce a lot of errors, manipulations into the data which gets into it, right? And Dev, you mentioned about deepfakes. Things like deepfakes, biases. How do you think this is going to influence digital immortal identities, and what are the necessary steps that should be taken to, correct it or maybe regulate that?
So basically, I mean, this is a real big problem practically if you look at it. I mean, like there are countries where the cult following has happened earlier, like for their leaders, and it has taken it into a different direction. So if I draw a parallel from those kind of scenarios, and if I imagine a digital immortal entity which is actually doing something like that, and a cult has been made out of that whole individual, it can just like go completely wrong in multiple levels. I mean, like at multiple levels, we're just going to like see scenarios where it will not work, we know. And then, as you said, like certain things might be wrong in certain countries or cultures or context. Whereas, like if I think about that whole thing from another country's perspective, all of that going to be like might be absolutely right. I mean, it's very complex rubric to be drawn. Even if we say like there are these 10 things, 10 metrics to look at, and then let's define the whole right and wrong principles part of it, and how do we judge this, how do we correct this, it's not going to be as straightforward. I mean, you can definitely think of a multidimensional array for each country, each cult within the country. Multiple cities would have like a different way of like doing the same thing. What's right in one place might not be right like in another place, which is like just 30 kilometers or maybe a few miles away. So I mean, I clearly see this is very complex. Honestly, it will take time. But again, communities would take charge of it. The more localized this is, the better it would be. And the more global digital immortal entities we talk about, there has to be a way of like accepting the whole thing. So the play example, like if I think of a leader who is a political leader and who has actually a view on certain thing and he's saying certain things. And if I ask certain questions, like you can imagine like Sophia right now, like if Sophia answers certain questions of a particular context, and we imagine like she is just like a digital immortal replica of somewhere else as an individual. I mean, what we have trained her on, that knowledge might not be like relevant for another context. If I talk about something, a place say down south in India, and that whole thing will change like for the north of India. And when she's saying something generically for India, say in the US, the context will change. So I mean, like definitely, what's right, what's wrong is going to be very complex. It has to be localized, and when it is generic, the generic rubric has to be made. Lots of work to be done. Definitely, that's this.
Thank you, Sridhar. Dev, what is your take on that?
I think it has to be localized. It cannot be, at least in my wisdom, I cannot see or even in foreseeable future that it will be at a stage where it could be very, very generic, right? It has to be localized. It has to be context centric, not context, but region, religion centric to start with, and then eventually build on top of those. And that's exactly the reason, coming to your previous question, I believe the corporates would need it more than the real people, because it will be very difficult to have training and building those immortal replicas for so many people with lesser data in a more just way, right? So therefore, probably a corporate would be able to capture that information at a larger level, use public and open source technologies and community-driven development efforts for sure. I'm sure the future is not centrally localized and governed. It is not going to be that way for sure. It will be decentralized. But yes, whatever we are going to create as a replica is going to be localized. It's going to be very specific to certain masses segments. And that's how it will evolve. I'm sure, again, with time to come, it might get better and better. But the way I see it in my lifetime, I think that would be the best thing to achieve.
Perfect. Thank you, Dev, Sridhar. So, I mean, I cannot stop myself to do the comparison between the actual human being, right? Because the way we learn, the way we have evolved, of course, most of that is also localized. We have learned in our families, with our friends, with our teachers. So, just to touch upon that aspect a bit more, as far as calibration, moderation is concerned for this digital being, do you think it should be done? I mean, after the person has been deceased, right? Do you think that should still be accessible to the close family, relatives, friends, colleagues to do the calibration? And if at all, can it really influence some of the decision-making power? Dev?
Yeah, so I think it should be self-learning. I don't think anybody else can take control of calibration and retraining of that replica, right? Because my son would be different than what I think, for sure. And he has some chromosomes and DNA from me, right? So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to let somebody else make a choice and say, let's re-evolve this replica by training again and recalibrating it again with the new information that's available. It either has to be self-learning or it should not. It should just stop, which I don't agree with. So I think it should be self-evolving, self-learning. Yes, the system needs to be robust enough to avoid biasing there, but I think it should be self-learning. The moment you give it into the hands of somebody else, that that individual's flavor and the biases will creep into the system. So if Steve Jobs' replica is passed on 5 generations, I'm sure it will not be Steve Jobs after that.
That is true. Sridhar, what is your take on that?
So I think like there is going to be a digital will that I'm going to write before I even imagine of a scenario where someone else is going to mess up who I am. So I feel like that's going to be a bigger problem. A lot of people might not even agree to have, or a lot of people might agree to have based on what part of information that they want to simulate after they're gone, basically. So once somebody is departed, and it's like how it happens today with properties, where it's inherited, but again, like, do you really have all the papers sorted all the time? Probably no. Not everybody writes a will. So there will be these challenges that we might run into. But again, eventually there will be a level of maturity where in another 20 years, 30 years of this technology really completely being evolved, people would actually decide whether they want it or not. I mean, like 20 years ago, like if I practically think about it, no, I wouldn't have imagined any website giving an option. What do you want to do with your data if something happens to you? Which as of today, some of the social networks are already providing us as an option. So technically, I won't want some of those decisions. But even if that happens, I would actually identify a hire who would actually take my particular will, or maybe I'll allocate a trusted person to decide how it would work. There has to be multiple caveats to be put in, and using those caveats, you should be able to like decide how somebody is going to control it. So I don't want more wisdom to be added to how I would think about certain things, but definitely, if there is a business, I'll take a very simple example. I mean, like if my kid is going to ask me something and they know if I'm going to say no for it, for sure they're not going to come and take permission for that. So there's no point of that wisdom. So they are looking for my wisdom for something else. So that could be like wisdom, something business related wisdom. So probably there would be these opted models where like even the generations later would look for very opted, very siloed information that they are sure that they would definitely come back to me and ask for answers for like the questions would be very specific to certain area. So I believe there is a lot of slice and dice that will happen to all of this. There are going to be selective areas. Should I have control over it? Definitely as an individual, if it is about my data and how I would be perceived in future, certain controls and checks should be given to me. And depends, like it's again, like the structure will come into place. I'm pretty sure about it, where select family members will have decision making on how certain things will be done. So lot of work has to happen, but again, that's my thought process on it.
I want to add there one thing. So I think my replica would have the option of terminating itself at some point in time. So if my replica feels that I'm being too divergent from what I used to be, it should have the option of terminating itself. So Mahatma Gandhi, after 5 generations, become Nathuram Godse, he will say, okay, I'm dying now. So that will happen. That will evolve in a way that the replica would have the option, and probably it is through will or technology or whatever it is, but it will have the option of terminating itself also. Because if it's of no use or if it's creating problem, I'm sure no society would want that.
Very well said, Sridhar and Dev. Thank you so much on that. Now moving to the technology side of it a bit more. According to Gordon Bill and Jim Gary from the Microsoft research team, they said that every conversation that a person has ever heard is already realistic to be captured, and it is just less than a terabyte of data with an adequate quality, right? So with the augment of technologies like quantum computing and whatnot, I think Sridhar, you mentioned about it a bit ago as well. Do you think we are transcending towards the right format of technology? And if no, what are the current challenges that we have in order to create truly digital immortal beings?
Yes, so the interesting aspect that I've seen in last 2 decades with technology is like more is always less. I mean, like there was a time when you can run a complete computer with like 2 MB or 30 MB RAM or storage drive. And like if I practically think about it today, I have like SSDs with like 512 GB on it. Or maybe I talk about 1 TB of space. I mean, that's also less for me. So to answer your question, like this is a very dynamic landscape. Things would constantly change. And if you believe like do we have everything in the right formula to do it? Probably answer is no. Because the desire to be the perfect, or maybe the pursuit of like getting the perfection of the final digital immortal will constantly push us for the more. But again, like the way things have been currently, I feel this will change with time. I mean, like there will be standardization. There will be, so as they've said, like corporates will know what is the standard rec. So if corporates are using it or businesses are using it, you will know what is the requirement to like launch this up. There are standard ways to like do it. But if individuals are trying to do it, like again, then there will be a different requirement for all of that. So I feel like this is still like too early, but again, that's where we stand right now.
Perfect. Dev, what is your take on that?
I think it's too early to make, but we are on the right track, I believe. I think the technology advancements in the last 2 decades has pushed us to think in this way, right? I mean, 20 years ago, talking about digital immortality, you would be called nuts, right? So I'm sure things are changing at a very rapid pace. It'll evolve. My concern is the hormonal, the emotional, the contextual information getting processed at a speed where it should be able to make snap decisions. So you should be able to transfer your information like your nervous system. You should be able to store information like your genes. You should be able to process it like your brain, right? I mean, yes, quantum computation will change a lot of things, but still it's not as fast as your brain. And things will evolve in that direction eventually. So, but we are on the right track. Again, as I said, it will take some time. And then the concept of biological and digital immortality, right? I believe, and I'm going to make a controversial statement, and probably it will be too hypothetical for somebody. People are saying that you can actually upload your brain somewhere and then reuse it in future, right? And I think when biological and digital immortality converges, it will happen very rapidly. What if this has already been happening hundreds and thousands of years ago? The process of uploading and downloading this information is called the act of dying and soul moving and into another soul. Yes, it's very hypothetical right now, but talk about call on Zoom 100 years ago. Who would have said it's possible, right? So yes, it's hypothetical. It's too fictitious right now, but I believe that could be a way of regenerating a human from what we are right now, post we die. Not exactly in the same fashion that the way I explained, but probably in a similar way.
Perfect. Thanks, Devanshidhar. I think that was pretty well said. So I think maybe we can quickly summarize whatever we have said. And maybe I would like to quote Jeremy Pickens, who is one of the senior applied research scientists for Catalyst. He says that are we just somehow repeating patterns? He believes that maybe he's wrong, but he's different, a different person every year, a year or two, and that is true for most of us as well. And this means the computer needs to synthesize, it needs to generate new behaviors it hasn't actually seen before. So we'll probably take some questions, Devanshidhar. To start with, I would like to pick up this one from Dheeraj Patil, who says, how digital immortality is going to help humanity to increase the standard of living of people?
I think I'll go on that. So I think a lot of ways, actually, if done right. So the standard of living is a function of your upbringing, your lifestyle, your surroundings. And I think if there's a digital immortality, as I said, I think going to the same concept, something which was relevant 100 years ago might be relevant again in future, right? So, or it will be relevant in future as well, and especially on ethical and moral side. So I think a lot of those aspects will be taken care of by digital immortality in times to come. And not only that, since you can get all the example that you started with, right? 1/10 of the cost of a real lawyer. All these things will eventually help you have a better standard of living also. So I think the digital immortality in the longer run is supposed to be beneficial, both commercially, socially, and emotionally as well. Shraddha, you want to add something in case?
Yeah, so I feel like it's a very nice question because if I practically think about it, the standard of living has actually already gone up if I compare to a decade ago in our country itself. And the reason behind it is because it is a knowledge industry now. So the moment you talk about knowledge industry, IT, and any other domain where you learn more, you move fast up the ladder, and you're able to contribute more. Now, all of this is connected to like knowledge. So the moment we talk about knowledge, if there is a teacher who is actually having a lot of information, knowledge, and if we can convert that whole thing into a digital immortality kind of setup, and this information is going to be very standard. Like imagine physics, the quantum physics, which like a lot of people have researched on, there is incremental progress in it, but still the fundamentals are same. I mean, so if the fundamentals are same and like it's the same 60% of content that I need to consume, if I can imagine if I can study from Richard Feynman as of today, that would be a huge thing. I mean, like if I can listen to those lectures from Einstein, if I feel great about it, I can imagine it to be another level. If I put the problem statement in front of them, they're actually giving some perspective about it. It might not be perfect, but again, like that would be another level of learning altogether. So the ease of access, the ease of knowledge being being provided to people has already gone to another level as of today. The moment that happens tomorrow, the global inaccessible knowledge base, which is right now like into very premium institutes, some of the professors, some of the industry veterans, I mean, they have a lot of information with them. If that comes into this kind of purview, I mean, it's just going to be a big game changer. And the more information is available to everyone for masses, it's just going to like be people are going to absorb it fast, and their standard of living is going to move up. So I feel that's the kind of correlation I clearly see with all of this right now.
Perfect. Thanks, Deven Sridhar. I think with the paucity of the time, we can probably take one last question. And this one is pretty interesting, coming from Omkar Chaudhary, who says that AI and AR are some way interrelated. So how far are we in the direction to have major influence on AR and AI from AI in terms of augmenting immortals?
So probably I'll take that one first. Probably then Viv can correct me anywhere or maybe add more to it. So last 4 or 5 days, I mean, having very interesting for me, meeting a few people, and AR metaverse has been like a big thing that has been talked about. And the beauty there is like how doctors would perform surgeries, and a lot of knowledge base of making it very minimal invasive was some of the use cases that are being implemented as of now when it comes to combination of AR and EM. So I clearly see it's not that far off for us to like really see all of this in action. I mean, if you practically think about it, like how they predict the ultrasound data for expecting mothers. I mean, it has become just a math now. Though it would be rocket science if you practically think about it. 30 years ago, like somebody going through like 5 scans a year, I mean, those 9 months, and then how the predictions are being done. And doctors pretty much know exactly it's going to be preterm or on term, things like those. I'm just taking a very clear practical example from a healthcare scenario. On other side, if we think about it, currently where we stand, I'm pretty confident. Like this mix is coming very fast out. A lot of invasive surgeries, which would actually do a lot of health condition, like add to the health condition where there's more bleeding that happens. So combination of robotics coming through AI and AR is just going to make that really very well combination thing.
Perfect. Thanks, Sridhar. Dev, would you like to add on anything?
No, I think
on
he
top of
covered
that?
everything. That day is not far where AI and AR is going to be talked in the same language. So I think it's going to happen very soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think we have reached to the end of this tech debate. So thank you so much, Sridhar and Dev. It was an amazing experience to host both of you in this tech debate. I'm pretty sure that our participants must have learned something new today. And also, I mean, as we are talking about digital immortality, who knows? Maybe the next meeting would be done by our digital identities by itself. So thank you so much once again, Dev and Sridhar, for joining us today for this tech debate. And thank you all the participants for being with us for this tech debate. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having us. Thanks, Sridhar. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Abhi. Thanks for having us. Thanks.
Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
I think you can take it offline also, right? I mean, what do you think?
I think we covered a couple of them already regarding
Yes.
data security and risk and around.
Yes.
I think we covered more or less everything in this one except for the hardware thing, which probably the answer is yes, it's evolving.
Yes.
It'll eventually capture all this. I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
Thanks, Renat, for staying this up. Apologies. Something really did got messed up on my laptop, which I will not discuss about.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Avi.
Thanks a lot.
Nice talking
Thank
to you
you
all.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.